Hi guys, and welcome back. Today what I am doing is upgrading a Yamaha CX5M MSX Computers MIDI FM unit. The unit's come out originally as an sgm01 and I'm upgrading it to an sgm05. It's not a big job, but there are a few things you got to watch out for, and there are some new ways to doing this upgrade rather than altering the board like we used to have to do. So let's strap in, have a look and see what comes up.
Stand by for action.
Hello and welcome to another episode, and in this one what I'm going to do is upgrade the sgm01 MIDI keyboard unit to an sgm05, which has a lot more features and that built into it, and has more control to run from the ports on the side here for the keyboards and that. So the customers asked me if I can do that. There is this one, and there is another one which somebody has had a bit of a hack into to try and upgrade it, which is not working anymore. So that may be one we will look at in due course, but this one here is one we've got to do. So earlier on I did a few videos on the Yamaha CX5M MSX PC, which this belongs to, and I ordered the ROMs because the ROMs for the upgraded software are bigger than the ones that are in here. I mean, we could have raised these and reused them, but they're not big enough to hold the software, so I ordered those and those have come in. So take the ROM out of here and put a socket in the board, and then there is a wire jumper to do, and then program the ROM, put the ROM in and check that it's all working, and we will go ahead and open this up so you can see what we're doing. Now to open these units up, it's pretty simple. It's just 4 screws. And the thing is with these is he would like one back working. The one that's faulty he's not overly fussed on, but if we could get it working he'd be quite happy in that, because these units are starting to get quite rare to get. So that's it. The steel plate is off, so we'll put the screws inside the plate so we don't lose them, and then the unit just lifts out pretty easily out of the case. So we'll set that aside. So we'll turn it over. So this is the ROM down here we've got to take out. We've got to desolder this, so we'll desolder this ROM, and we need to put a socket in its place. The new chip is exactly the same size, just the pin out is different. Yeah, as in the pin arrangement is exactly the same amount of pins. It's just that the pin out arrangement is a little bit different. So what I'll do is I'll get this, turn it upside down, and we'll desolder this ROM out of this board, and then we will go about putting the ROM in. Okay, so what I've done is I've desoldered this ROM chip and I've put a socket in its place, and so it's just the socket is the same physical, as I was saying, pin out as the ROM chip is and what the new ones are going to be. So I've done that, just had a quick look over the board, and I've gone through and recapped the board as well. So I've taken out all the old capacitors and recapped it, because it being about the same age as the MSX, so that was redone. So I've done that. So they used to turn around, and there was the original mod to these was cutting tracks on the board to disable the 5 volts and the 12 volt rails and that on the board, so that the new chip wouldn't get destroyed because the voltages are in the different places. But what they do now is there's another mod to this where you can tap off of the rail on the bottom of the edge connector here, on the MSX edge connector, and run a wire through and actually solder it to one of the legs on a chip. So, but what I've decided to do, I wanted to make this was fully backward compatible to the original version 1s. So it would go back to the early sgm01 chip if he wishes to do so. And so what I decided to do is, there's another mod which that I'm going to do, which is to run the wire, but I'm going to actually bend the leg out, and rather than solder to it so it's there physically, I'm actually going to make it so there's a socket of I'll get like a 8-pin IC socket, and I'll just cut off one leg. So I have one leg in a plastic holder that I'm going to heat shrink onto a piece of wire, and then what I can do is then just plug it on, and if they want to revert back, they can just unplug it, put the original one back in, and there's nothing been altered on the board itself. So I'm going to go down that track because it just makes more sense that I'm not altering the board. So therefore, if someone wanted to put it back to stock standard, they can do. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to get a bit of wire, and I'm just going to, as I say, get a socket and just cut one of the little legs off the socket and heat shrink it, and then put the wire in and solder it onto the pin under the board. Okay guys, so I've done that. So you might be able to see it there. There's that wire I've soldered on there. Now what it is, it just solders to a non-used pin on the board here. And as I says, I'll pull up the diagram so you can actually see what pin number that's meant to be. I think it's, off the top of my head, I think it's 35. But the wire, I've just run it between the tracks up the side here of the board. And what you can do is, this is all earth on the side here, so you can actually cut a little niche out of it that the wire goes into the board slightly, so when the case goes over, you're not going to pinch and cut the wire. And then what I've done is I've run the wire up and through one of the legs under the edge connector. Now this is all insulated wire, so I've done that so it just stops the wire from floating around all over the place. And I've put a single pin from a socket, from an 8-pin socket into there, soldered it, and put a bit of heat shrink on the end of it. And this will just then push onto the end of the IC once it's been programmed. Okay, so I will go ahead and bring out the programmer and go through that step of programming the new IC. Okay, so this is the program I use. It's a TL8662 Plus. These I find are really good. They do just about most of the things I want to do, and you can get adapters to go into them. So I bought this as a kit off AliExpress. It comes with the CD, but this software is now out of date, but there are updates you can download online for free, and it comes with all the extra adapters that I've got here for PLCDs and all sorts. But these are the units. It does come with the onboard inline programmer, but I never ever used it, and apparently they're a little bit hit and miss because the amount of power they draw through them through the USB on these. So we're not going to need any adapters for this because this is a standard 28-pin inline dip. So we open it up, you put the IC in. Now these are marked. It's not very good because it's recessed into the top, but the front of it's towards the lever. So we need to drop our IC in there, and then we lock it down. Now I got a long USB cable. I think it's 1.52 meters, so it's heaps long enough to go into this and into the PC, so it doesn't need too far away. And then we just plug that in, and then it just goes into the PC to power it on. And then once it powers on, we fire up the software, and once we fire up the software, then we can program the chip. Okay, so as you can see, the red light's on, which means the power is actually on the machine. And these are the chips I got in from China. So as I said, I got a few extras in. They are UV erasables, they're not the electrical erasable ones. They're just cheaper to buy, and I do have a UV eraser for it. So basically we take it off, you look at the chip and you'll see the notch in the front of it. The notch in the front of it goes to the front of your programmer. So we just get that, drop that down in here and lock our pin in. So once we've done that, then we fire up our software. Okay guys, so here I've got the software for the programmer loaded, and all the F's on the screen. That just tells me that the ROM is blank. I've just done a quick check on it and it is blank. So what we do is to load the ROM is you go to load, and then it tells you to browse, so you can look for the file, and I've got it in my downloads under sgm01. So I go into here, unzip the file, and then select the ROM file, and then we go open, and it'll ask us, is this the file? And we go yes. So okay, and as you can see in here, it's got all the information. This is the later version because it's the 1984 version. So we can just look down here and you can have a quick look through it and see if you can read anything, but a lot of it tends to be gibberish, so I wouldn't worry about it. But what I'll do is there's a guy on the msx.org site, and he asked the same question about upgrading the ROM in these, and there was one of the guys on that site that actually told him how he could do it with doing the wire like I'm doing. So I'll just flip you over through to that, and here we are on the msx.org site, and this is the guy that was actually asking about it, and of course there's a bit of discussion going on through it here. On the second page, this is the guy I was telling you about, and is it Wierzabowski, I think is his name, but that's what he goes by on the site. And here's his pictures of showing on the back of the board. So it's pin 27 it comes from, and then he routes it around. I've just done a little bit different, and all this is copper all around the back here. This is all just the earthing, so you can actually cut into that. These are just wires from earth on one side to earth on the other. So you can actually just file a piece into there so the wire runs through it, because the metal shroud runs hard against the edges of the board. So you don't want it pushing on that because it will cut through. The first time I did it, I didn't cut this piece in it and the wire got broken. So the second time around I put a new wire on it, and I just filed this out a little bit so the wire would go in and below the edge of the board. And there's another picture of it there he shows you. And then further down there's just a little bit about me asking him about the board and how to do the track, and if there's anything else I needed to do. And which he said no, because once you do this is the 5-volt rail you're needing, and you're taking out the 12-volt that's not being used. So you can use the standard version 5 ROM, that's fine. This is the only thing we change. So we'll go back to the programmer now, and so with this in, then we'll go in and we just tell it to program, and then from here it'll go through, it'll program. And no, that's I forgot to set the right ROM we're going to use, so I will go in and do that now. Excuse me, I've got to read the writing, so I need to put some glasses on to tell me what the model number is. So there are 27C256. So we're an M27C256. And we have a couple of them there, and I think these are STs. So we got ST, and you can see there's two different types. There's the PLC, which is the flat pack 32 pin, but we're running the 28 pin, which is the top one. So we just make sure that is selected, and we select that. So we're set up for the right one, and so it tells us on the right hand side here this is the right one. So now we've changed it, we're going to load the ROM back up, which we have it loaded there. So we go OK. They're all set to go. And so now with all that in, we turn around and we go program, and it says, is this, you sure this is the right one? And yes, so we go program. Now you'll get this with some of your ICs, and that they will turn around, even if you've selected the right one, they'll turn around and say that the ID is not correct. So what we can do is we can actually go back and tell it to turn that off. So down the very bottom of it, of your software, there'll be a little tick box which has to check the ID of the ROM. So if you untick that, and you know that it is the right one, then you'll find now this time if we go into it and tell it to program it, and we go yes, we want to program this, as you see it's now going through and programming it. I don't know why it does it. It's some of the chips, even though this is a proper ST chip, it doesn't, it says it's not, but I don't know. That may be the updated firmware, it may not be. So that beep was just to tell us that we'd flashed it. I did tell it to verify when it done, so it come back and it verified and said yes, and everything is finished fine. And that is it. So everything is done. So what we can then do is go back, and what we can do is tell it to read the chip. So we can go say, go ahead and read it. And we go read, and it will go through and read it. And there it is, and it's come back with exactly the same as what we programmed it with. So that chip is all done and ready to go. So now what we do is then we exit out of this and we go back over to the bench, take the chip out. We put a label over the window so it can't, the UV light over time can't erase it. And then we put it into the board and away we go. So, we got to bend the pin out on it that we need to put the 5 volts onto. So from here we will go back to the other board. Okay, so now we're back here with the programmer, and so now what I'm going to do is just unlock it and pop that chip out. Now the first thing you want to do when you've programmed these is get yourself a opaque type label. In the old days I used to use the metal ones that used to be on the old 5 1/4 inch floppy disks. They were really good. But what I do is I have a lot of these little labels. I picked them up from the local craft shop. They're for printers, for printing on and things like that. But I just use those and just go over top of the window. And when we go over top of the window, that just stops the UV light from trying to erase what we've just put on there. So we're finished with the programmer, so now I'll unplug it. And as you can hear and see, it's turned itself off. So when I put this away, I generally pop the lever down so it doesn't get broken. We put this back in the box. It's not the tidiest, guys, but it sits up on the shelf at close readiness for when I need it. So what I'll do is I'll just wind this up and get this out of the way. Okay, so I'll get these other bits out of the way. The rest of these ROMs I'll put back in their protective bubble wrap. Put those up somewhere safe. And now this one here is the one we just programmed, so I will grab a pen, and what we'll do is we'll put on here that it's an 05. So it's on there for an 05. You might be able to see that very well. It's like a metallic gold, just a marker pen, just so I can see what it is. And so then what we do is then we've got at this chip here, where the notches on the front here, on this side, is the second pin in on the right hand, on this right hand side here. This is the one we've got to bend this leg out. This is the one that needs the 5 volts. So what I do is I get my trusty little pliers, and I just gently, you don't want to break it, so I just gently, and so what I've done is I've just, as you can sort of make out there, I've just bent that out to the side. That's all I've done. And I've just bent that out to the side so then the little socket will just slide over it, and so when we don't need it, they can take it out of the socket and put the original one in, which that's, I think, is 12 volts, and that's why we've bent this pin up, because otherwise it would have fired 12 volts through it, and that wouldn't have done it any favours, I can tell you. So with this, and that's the difference between the two. The original chip was like this, where all the pins went in the board, whereas this one has the one pin out. And so that one is a faulty one from the one that wasn't working. I have the original Yamaha chip which came out of the first one, so they can have that back, and if they want to, they can pull this upgrade out if they don't like it and put the original one back in and have the original software. Or if we get the other unit working, they could have two. They could have one as original, and they could have one with the newer software in it. Alrighty, so I'll move that out of the way, and we'll get the board, and we'll stick the chip in it. Okay, so here's our board and our chip. And so when you look at the chip, when you put your socket in, the notch goes towards the socket, to the edge connector, I should say. So this notch in this bottom socket goes towards the edge connector, and therefore it has the notch in the ROM as well, which goes to the same end towards the edge connector. So one thing to remember is when these chips are new, the legs are always wider than the socket, and I find a trick for doing this is you can lie them down on something flat and just gently rock them over to bend the pins in. And that doesn't need a lot. There are tools you can get for doing this, and I actually do have a 3D printer, and there are some files where you can get which you can do icy leg benders. And what I'll do is I might bring that up on a later video and just show you guys. You can go and download it and print them up, and you can get ones for doing the narrow chips, and you can get them for doing the normal size chips and the larger ones. So we'll get that, and we'll pop that in, just make sure it's going to sit. Sorry guys, I just can't see the pins if they're sitting in the holes or not. I just got to move it a little bit for myself. Make sure that is going to go in. Yep. And that's it. That's down. So the only thing you might have to do is this filter capacitor here. You might have to lean it forward so that you can get to the pin from behind. So as you'll see there, that pin comes out it'll come out very close to the filter capacitor there. And so then what we do is then, here is my lead that I made up, and in the end of that I'll just bring it so you might get a better look at it, if it'll focus. So as you can see, that little black piece there, that's just part of an IC that I cut with, which had the plastic part on it. I sacrificed a couple of pins either side and got that, and then soldered the wire onto it and put a bit of heat shrink onto it, and that just insulates it. And then all I do with that is I just get it and then just slide it onto the end of the pin, and then that goes. I've got to be able to see to do this, I can't do it blind, but it just slides up and onto the pin like that, and then that stays on there. And you just check your continuity from the pin to where it's connected underneath the board, and if you're all good, then it's done, and we can put it back together and test it. So that's how easy it is. And if they want to go back to a version 1, all they need to do is unplug this, take that out, put the original chip in, and they're back to a version 1 again, and there's no harm to the board or anything. You could probably use a different type of pin here if you want to. You could probably get a tuned round one or something like that, but I just had these on hand, and I can sacrifice an 8-pin one to make one up. So that's that. So this is basically done. So all we're going to do is put it back together now, and then put it into the MSX and give it a try and make sure it all works. And when you put these in, you got to remember that when you take them out, it's got to go in upside down on the top rather than on the bottom. Just got to make sure that shield pops down. There are holes they sit on. That's it. And it's got to go back on an angle to go in there. They are quite fiddly to get in and out, to get behind the shields and so forth. And it can be a bit of a pain. It's just a matter of getting everything in the right angle for it all to drop down and in. And as you can see with this one here, this is just all popped in just now. It's just at the back here. It's because of these RCA plugs and the mount post at the back here that's so tight. That's what causes you the issue, trying to get those through, because they stick out whereas everything else is flush. So that's why it actually causes you your issues. And so then we just grab this, and we can move that one out. And this will only go on one way. As you can see, they're actually opposed to being close to the edge and further in, and you just look at where they line up, and so that's the right way. So that just drops down on top, and then these screws go in. And then once you pop these screws in, then we can get the MSX out and pop it in and make sure she works. Alrighty. Okay, so this is actually a picture of what the original software looked like when it was in the version 1. And as you can see, it's of the day. It's sort of very basic looking in that. And so now what we have, this is what the 05 version looks like. And as you can see, it's a lot different to what the early version was. And the unit works fine. It powers up and comes on, and the customer's going to be happy with that, I think. So that's another one done. So what we need to do is at some stage just have a look at that faulty unit and find out what's going on with that. So that'll be another video. So I hope you liked this one. It was a little short one for you. It wasn't a really big involved one, but hopefully it was enjoyable and you got some information out of it. Until next time, we'll catch you then.